Congratulations, you made it through the first interview. Your second interview is most likely going to be your first real interview. But again, there's going to be even more volatility in this one just because so many different companies do it so differently. Microsoft doesn't even typically have a second interview because they like to give a lot of on-sites. Google does one phone call. Facebook does 2 video interviews, 1 strategy, 1 product. Uber does 1 product, 1 case interview. Intuit does 1 video interview with 2 people. There's tons of different ones. But most likely the combination you're going to get is 1 interview with 1 person, 1 interview with 2 people, or 2 interviews with 1 person each. And they're most likely going to be a video interview, but sometimes there'll be a phone call. And if you have 2 interviews, they're most likely going to be back to back. But what you can expect for them is 1, the company will most likely give you a heads up, but you should be prepared for it. Definitely 100% you are going to get at least 1 product interview. So by the time you're at this stage, your product interviews should be ready. And the other one is going to be either a technical interview, which is what Oath does, another product interview, reviewing a case. So if you interview with Uber or Lyft, you're going to get a case assignment and then your interview will be on your case essentially, or it'll be another product interview or execution if you're interviewing with Facebook. That's most likely what you can expect for your second interview. Okay, so in this interview, your tell me about yourself has to be prepared. But what they're really going to be looking for at this stage more is that behavioral component. Most of your interviewers will start off your interviews with a few behavioral questions, maybe 1, but definitely tell me about yourself. Talk about your experiences. Remember, this is when you want to get them on your side so you can really develop that rapport with them to kind of establish a connection. So, but what they're going to be looking for is that you can answer product questions well. So at this point, as long as you've adequately prepared for product questions, you should be in good shape. But I would say that what most people end up struggling with is that instead of being in person, that this is going to be over the phone or video. And if it's over the phone, that can really struggle because your interviewer can't really see you. And it's difficult for them to pay attention the whole time. So if it's a phone interview, one of my big tips for you guys is to keep them engaged as long as possible. Always be talking aloud your thoughts. If you kind of have that moment of silence for a minute or 2, it's going to be difficult for your interviewer to stay engaged. They'll start looking around their office, if their computer's in front of them, they'll start messing around. So try and keep them engaged and listening the entire time. Also, another big tip for if it's a video interview, do it. You really should do this because it's going to help you be more competitive against other candidates. So get a quiet room with a whiteboard. So if you're in your school, your work, book a room that has a whiteboard in it and just set the camera up on your laptop like you're interviewing a person. And you want to write on the whiteboard and use that as your background. And that's really going to help differentiate yourself and impress the interviewers. Every single interviewer that I interviewed with complimented me when I had a whiteboard prepared. It shows that you're prepared and it can only help you. So in terms of preparing for this interview, you just should really be grinding on your product questions and you should have them locked in by the time you get to the stage. Usually they're not going to ask as difficult product questions in this interview as they will their on-site. Kind of questions I've got are improve the grocery shopping experience, invent a product for Uber, and what's your favorite app and improve it. So not super complicated or difficult questions, but you should really be prepared. And at this stage, you should be looking at the company specifically. So going on Glassdoor and practicing previous questions from them. And as well, what you should be doing is about 2 weeks ahead of time, you should be trying to really focus on that specific interview piece. So if you have Facebook coming up in 2 weeks, you should really get your execution interviews down ahead of time. And if it's one of your top choices, you should be preparing for it even farther in advance, just because it's also going to be involved on your on-site. But again, just really make sure you have your product questions down at this point. And if you followed my advice from the last video, then you should have your behavioral interviews locked in at this point as well. Your tell me about yourself should be an absolute killer by now. So again, this is going to be your first real interview, and so you don't make the same mistake I do. Don't wait until you get offered this interview. Just assume you're going to get it and start practicing your product interviews super far in advance. That way, when they offer you this interview, you can just do it the first day possible. So good luck and crush your second interview.